Okay. And yes, Bryan will be moderating. So so if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll also have some breaks when I'm like presenting to also answer some of the questions that he can't answer through chat. So yeah, so also stay to the end. We'll send out a link of how you can check in to be qualified for a raffle that SB Hacks will host after all our workshops are over. So, you know, free stuff, y'all. Okay, so we do have a couple of upcoming events. So I just wanted to mention them. All of these are beginner friendly and you do not have to be a UCSB student to join. So the first one, you guys are already in it. It's called Intro to Web Apps. The next one that we'll host is the Game Development Workshop, and that will be on November 23rd from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The third one that we're gonna host is a Team Mixer. So these are all before our actual main hackathon. The Team Mixer is an event where you can maybe meet people to join up and make teams before the actual hackathon starts. So that will be on January 7th from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time as well. And yeah, so our SB Hacks, if you don't know about us, we do host a hackathon at UCSB every year. This year will be our 7th iteration. It will be completely online. It will be from January 15th to 17th, 2021. And we have a lot of fun workshops and events being prepared for y'all. So we're really excited to have this hackathon this year online. So apply on our website, sbhacks.com, in a few weeks. Our apps will be posted real soon. If you want to stay in touch with us, that's the best way to know when apps get sent out. So I'm gonna send out some links to our social medias and to our website. So yeah, so give us a follow. You'll stay up to date to like all the stuff that we're doing, and you'll also get notified when the apps come out. So our Facebook and Instagram is what we use the most, so I would recommend following those. So yeah, please apply for us when our apps open. Okay, so for this workshop, we're going to start with like the basics. So the purpose of a web app is to allow users to interact with the interface or product from the web. So a web app can be as basic as like tic-tac-toe or as complicated as Amazon.com. So there's usually some sort of database in the backend to store the user or content information, and also so much more. But at the core of the app really comes down to 3 languages, which are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if you already have some experience in these languages, that's awesome. But in this workshop, we're gonna assume everyone is a beginner in those things, but has some experience in some programming language already. So if you don't have any experience in coding, that's also totally fine. We're gonna discuss these things on a really high level, so you'll definitely still get something out of this workshop. And for the outline for this workshop, we're gonna go over, you know, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on a really high level before going into a demo where we'll show you how you can like use these technologies to actually make an app. So it's easier to learn with some kind of target in mind. So the goal that we're gonna achieve in this workshop is making a basic meme generator app. So I hope y'all enjoy. And also, as a side note, depending on how many people are interested from this workshop, SB Hacks will also is also willing to host another workshop to go more in depth about APIs and databases and how to incorporate those in a hackathon app. So yeah, we'll be asking you if you guys are interested in that at the end. Okay, so we're gonna start with HTML first. So what is HTML? It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It lays out the content and basic structure of a website/web app. So the HTML elements build up the page, and these are represented by tags. You can see example on the slide there. That one is a paragraph tag, so they're represented by like a less than and a greater than sign, and the actual element name inside the tag, and then you can put stuff inside of it. If you look at the bottom picture, it kind of shows more of a breakdown of the element, and that has its own like attributes that you can attach to each element. So in this case, this text has an href attribute, and that's pointing to a certain website. So href is used to redirect to other websites. So there's other kind of attributes you can attach to HTML, and I'll kind of go into more of that on the next slide. So just like a quick point, like there's something called a DOM that's used by the browser to lay out the structure, and that's kind of how the browser knows what it needs to render. So here's a simple example of HTML and kind of how it looks. So note that every HTML document starts with a HTML and body element. Most HTML documents have a head tag that describes like the metadata on the page. So for example, what I mean by metadata is if you see there's like a title tag, I don't know if you can see it, it's like kind of at the top. That defines what's actually what the text is in your browser tab looks like. So it would change like what you can see there. There's also different elements I can use to display my web page. So just a couple examples. H1 is a heading element that's on the page here. You can see it translates to a heading or a header on my page. You can also see an unordered list element that's labeled as UL. There's also stuff inside the list, and those are list items, and those are labeled as LI. So there's also a table that's labeled with the table tag over here. And you can kind of maybe guess like the other tags now that TR means like table row, and TH means table headers, and TD is like table definition, and these are the values that are actually going into the table. There's also another element here is like image. You probably guess that's an image, and that translates to the picture that you see on the right-hand side. There's also a button element, and that's something I can use to add to my page. So if I click on it, it can maybe do something. So you definitely don't need to memorize any of these. I'm just kind of giving you an example like what kind of elements you can have on your HTML page. And you can also easily find all these different elements or all like the list of all these elements online. So I'm just giving you an overview of the different like tags you can use on your page. So, but as you can see from like this page, it looks kind of ugly though. So that's kind of where CSS comes in. So CSS, it stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It's really all about the style and visual structure of the content. So it makes things look really pretty and appealing. It also tells the browser how it wants to display the HTML, and it uses something called selectors and putting attributes on them. So if you look at the picture, there's an example of a CSS selector. So the CSS uses, what it means by selectors means it takes like, in this case, it's taking all the H1 elements and then adding a certain property and value to it. So that's what it's marked as a decoration. I realized I was pointing like this, but I probably should use my mouse to point. So like over here. Yeah, so in this case, we're setting the H1 element as the color blue, and we're also adding another property called font size, and we're making it to a 12 pixel value. So CSS is pretty close to real life language, kind of like HTML is, so it's like really beginner friendly in that sense. You don't really need to know a whole lot of programming to actually like write in these languages. So that's pretty neat. And I'm gonna go into like a really quick demo about like how to use like CSS selectors and how you can incorporate these into your page. I'm gonna use something called CodePen. It's a really nice platform where you can experiment with like web development stuff. It's also linked on the slide here, so if you ever wanna go back, you can definitely go back and refer to it from the slides. So yeah, so here's the CodePen. This is the same HTML I had on the previous slide. So now what you're gonna do is gonna like make it look better, basically. So let's change like the heading element. I want this heading element you see here, I wanna make it centered. So I already have all the like stuff pre-typed out, because if I actually typed it live, it would take me too long, but I'm gonna try to explain what I'm doing as I go. So I added like this text align property and I centered it. So you can kind of guess, oh, that probably centers the text. As you can see, now my heading is now in the center of the page. You can also do something, you can also select by classes. And so, for example, you see these 3 different paragraph elements here. Like what if I want to only apply some kind of CSS property to only 2 of them, but I don't want to apply it to this one? I can use one of the HTML attributes as a class and then assign it to this class and then select by that class. So to do that in CSS, use a dot. So you do dot example like this. And now anything I put in here will be changing what you see on the HTML page. So if I do this, now you can see the 2 paragraph elements that have this class are now red. Yeah, you can also be more specific. You don't have to use classes. You can actually target specific elements. So for this last button here, I actually attached an ID attribute. So I put ID equals and then specific ID. So now I can change like this button here. And you do that by using the pound sign. So like this. So now you can see I specifically target that element and then changed a bunch of properties about it, and none of the other things got changed. So that's another example of a CSS selector that you can use. Now let's say I want to change all the text in here. If you remember, in all of this code is inside this body tag. So what I can do is quickly put another selector for body and then change all the font change it to a different font. So now you can see everything changed. Yeah, and then you can also be even more fancy with CSS. You can do CSS like kind of event things. So like one of them that's used a lot is like a hover event. Like when you hover something, like maybe something color or something changes. So I can do that real quick. For example, that's indicated by a colon. So this means like, oh, on the image element, when I hover over it, I want to change like the border radius to 50%. So you can see that happen when I hover over the image, and now it changes it to like a circle. So that's actually changing the CSS when we do hover over it. So there's a lot of other events that you can also do in CSS, but that's just one example. You can find these online. There's a lot of sources for these. And just to show you this last one, this one is just for the shows. You can do something really fancy like this in CSS. So what this one is doing is selects all the list items inside the unordered list. So that's over here, and then applies this color blue to every single odd element. So yeah, so with CSS, you can be really, really fancy like this. And that's just an example of what you can do with it. Yep. So I just showed some really basic styling, but you can definitely make it more complicated. We'll share the slides again at the end, so you can go back and refer to it. There's also a link to W3 Schools in the bottom left. That's a really nice website and resource that lists a lot of web development stuff, so you don't actually have to go and remember everything. You can just go back and play around with stuff on there. There's also a lot of CSS libraries online that are used to speed up the designing process. So then you don't actually have to code everything yourself. So we're actually going to use one in the demo. It's called Bootstrap. You might have heard of it. It's really popular and really simple to use. So now we know about like HTML and CSS. These are kind of static though. Like what if we want our page to actually do stuff? This is where JavaScript comes in. So what is JavaScript? It's a scripting and programming language that's used to implement more complex features on the web page. One thing to note about it is that variables don't need defined types. So you might know from like Java, you have to define like, oh, a variable has to, if it's a string, you have to say it's a string, or if it's an integer, you have to say it's integer. But in JavaScript, you can just say var, which is just a variable, or you can also say constant, which is also like a very general variable. So yeah, that's one point to know about it. And also JavaScript makes the page more interactive by changing element content. So for example, when you scroll down Facebook, new posts get loaded whenever you reach the bottom, and that is done with some of the JavaScript magic. Some of the core aspects, they also use selectors as well. And they also have JavaScript events and handlers and listeners. So very similar to CSS, JavaScript can also select things from an HTML page and then change certain aspects of it. There's an example on the slides of selecting all H1 HTML elements and then changing the text inside of it. So JavaScript is the most like a real like language that you guys are probably familiar with, but it's also really beginner friendly, just like HTML and CSS. You can also kind of guess what it's doing just by looking at it. So yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about JavaScript and why it's like so useful. So it can change CSS and or HTML and CSS attributes on the fly, so it gives life to your web app. This gets done through things called events, and these are things that happen to the HTML elements, and JavaScript is able to react when these events happen. So for example, I can set some code up to detect when a certain button element is clicked on my page and then change the HTML and CSS attributes like as a result. You can also set up event listeners such as a key press to trigger some other code to be run, like pressing space on a space bar in the dinosaur game on Chrome causes the dinosaur to jump. Another point on JavaScript is that it doesn't wait for HTML to load before running. So if you want to run it in a separate file on a web page, you need to make sure you enclose it in something called like window.unload. So this is an event that only gets fired when everything on your page is fully loaded, and that avoids a lot of the bugs that are related to JavaScript. So if you have problems when you're running your JavaScript, you might be because you didn't wait for everything to load on your page. Even if you like read through, you're kind of like, oh yes, everything seems logical. I don't know why it's not working. It's probably because your page is not loaded. So that's just one point to know. And just like CSS, JavaScript also has a ton of other libraries that are being used to make things more simple. You might have heard of some of these. The really popular ones are React, jQuery, TypeScript, Angular, And there's so many more, and they're just more and more created every single year. So how these texts all to come together, I'm going to use this classic skeleton analogy. So HTML is kind of like the bones of a person. So it's like the bone of the web app. The JavaScript is kind of like the muscles, makes things actually like work together. And the CSS is like the skin. That's what you actually see on the page, makes things like look a lot better. So yeah, that all comes together and makes like a human. So of course, there's some more we didn't really cover in this workshop, like database and APIs. That would be way too long. So we only wanted to focus on the really fundamental elements, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Yeah. Before I get into demo, we'll pause for any questions. I see that there is one on chat. So Zachary asks, like, wait, so is there no way for HTML to change itself? No, I don't believe so. You have to do it through JavaScript. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? You can also unmute for this part. Okay, alrighty. I will assume there are no questions on that slide part, so I will go into the demo. Give me a sec. Need to share this part. Okay. Yeah, so for the first part of the demo, I need to first download the starter code from the starter code repo. So for this workshop, there are two repos. One of them is the starter code with just nothing in the file. So it just has like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with nothing in it. If you want to code along with me for the workshop, but if you just want to follow along with like the finished code, that's also totally fine. There's another repo link for that. And this is all on GitHub. And also, if you just want to watch me code, that's also totally fine. So it's really up to your preference how you want to follow along with what's going on in the workshop. So I'll send those links out right now. Okay. Okay. And so in each repo, there's written down instructions of how to run the app again in case you want to refer back to it. So I'll open one of them right here. So it's like right on the same GitHub page. If you don't know what GitHub is, it's kind of like Google Drive for code. You can upload your code online and have other people work on it, or just publish it like, out on the internet. So in a sense, it is kind of like Google Drive. That's like the best way I can explain it in like one sentence. Yeah, so the first step is to actually get this code onto my machine. So first I'm actually going to fork it, so because this is just the start, because I want to make my own copy so I can change it as I want. So to do that, you just click on the fork button on the page, and that's on the top right. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to fork it to my account. So it might take a few seconds. But once it's done, now I have this personally, and I have my own copy. So yeah, that's cool. So now I need to actually get this code onto my computer. So I'm going to use Git, but I'll briefly explain if you don't know what Git is or like how it works. So I'm going to use a command called git clone. So what git clone does is takes like this stuff. You see it's on the internet and stuff, but I actually want to download it to my actual personal laptop. So I'm going to open the terminal and then do the command. So I copied the SSH key. So that's how I can get those files from the site and then put it onto my computer. Okay, so now I have it downloaded in this folder. So I'm going to use a text editor called Sublime Text to write code. You can feel free to use like any text editor that you have, but you can also use an IDE like Visual Studio. But I'm just going to use this one since it's like really simple to use. So let me open it on my computer. Okay. Yeah, so as you can see in the starter code, there's already files in here. There's the HTML, the CSS, and JavaScript files. So those are related to the language we talked about earlier. These are just the file versions. So if we click on these, there's like nothing really in it. It's just kind of setting up a really basic structure of how you can start off on a web app. So now we actually want to run it, right? So we can see our page live. So what we need to do is actually open the folder from the library. So I go here, so this is where my code is. I click on it, and what I want to do is I want to open the HTML file and open it into a browser. So to do that, it's really easy. You just do right click on it, and then you open with whatever browser of your choice. I'm going to use Google Chrome since that's what I use the most. And as you can see, now I can see, wow, my website is here. It says hello world. That's awesome. Whatever. That's cool. Anyway, I'm actually going to open it in incognito because for Chrome, sometimes it does this thing where like it caches some of the files. So when you change it, it doesn't actually change. So if you're having issues seeing your code actually change live, it might be because you're not in incognito, or there's some like caching thing going on. Okay, so let me open the code on the other side so you can see these side by side. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is just the hello world of the starter code, but we actually want to create a meme generator app, right? So what do we need first? Let's like kind of brainstorm and think through it. We obviously want to start with the HTML first because that is like the backbone of everything. So we want a picture to put our meme text on. We also want some text to be on our meme. We also want 2 text inputs for the top and bottom part of the meme. So we're trying to go for that classic 2013 meme vibe where you have the bold white font on the top and bold white font on the bottom. So let's start one by one. We're going to do the picture first. So to make things easier, we actually imported this outside library called Bootstrap that gives us some CSS libraries that we can use, so we don't have to like code all the nice CSS stuff from scratch. So for example, we're going to use something like called text center class to center everything, to make everything look nice. Actually, before I go into that part, let me explain like what's also going on this HTML page. So you can see this, there's a comment here explaining the bootstrap.css. So what this is doing is linking to that Bootstrap library, which is hosted online, and that's how you link the CSS file to your HTML file. We also put our own CSS file here, so this is how you link files locally if you're not actually using like any libraries or anything. And the other part is how we actually link the HTML with our JavaScript. That's this last part. This is indicated by a script tag. So we add like the source. This just means like, oh, where is the actual like JavaScript file? It's right here. This is the path for it. So similarly, this is also the path for our CSS. And so this is actually how these 3 things like actually tied together. They're tied together on the HTML page. So yeah, backtracking, now we want to actually put elements on our page. So we're going to put everything in this div container using the text center class with Bootstrap. So that's just a really fast way for us to like center everything without actually having to like rewrite that code again. So yeah, I also have it. I'm also going to copy it since typing it would also take a while. So so those are like 4 or 3 divs that we created. So these are all using Bootstrap CSS libraries, and how it works is that you just put in a class and it has some preloaded CSS in this file over here that you can use to make your websites look really nice. And what we can also do is also change the metadata like part where the title is. So right now you see it says hello world. Like in the slides we were able to change it. So let's change it to like meme generator. That makes actually more sense. So if we refresh, you can see in the top left that the tab changed to what we wanted it to be. So yeah, now this will make everything center. So we actually want a picture for our meme. So let's go ahead and put an image element inside. And also in the starter code, there's a dog GIF. So you don't actually have to like download a meme already. So you could just use that one to format everything. So that's what I'm using here. I'm also adding the ID because later we want to select it with our JavaScript or with our CSS. So that's just thinking a little bit ahead of the game. So if we refresh now, oh, we can see a beautiful dog on the side. So that's cool. Now we have our picture for our meme. Yeah, so now we want to put the actual text boxes for our meme. So we're going to use H1 elements for that. And so let's go ahead and put those in. So if you refresh now, you can see it like this. So yeah, so the way to run, you just save and then you refresh, and then stuff should be changed on your browser. So yeah, so this is great. So, but it doesn't really go to where we want it. So this is where our CSS will come in. We'll do that like after we lay out all the stuff that we want on our HTML page. So we also want some input text boxes, right? So we want the user to be able to generate their meme just by typing what they want on or onto the meme. So we're also going to use more Bootstrap stuff. We're going to use their form group class, so that will just make our input boxes look a lot nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and also, copy those over. There you go. So let me explain kind of, because I didn't really talk about like forms when I was explaining HTML. So for each input, you need to have a label. So it knows when you submit this form, like what is the input actually for. And you can kind of guess like input, that is the actual input box. And then you want to specify what kind of type it is. We want text boxes. As we refresh, we can actually like type stuff in it, but there's different kinds of types you can have. You can have radio buttons, which is like probably what you're familiar with, like from online quizzes, like multiple choice quizzes. And there's also some other ones I just can't think of off the top of my head. But yeah, we also put some ID attributes on here. So later when we select with JavaScript, it's really easy for us to like do stuff with it. So yeah, so now we also want a button to like, indicate when we actually want to generate our text, right? So let's also make a button at the bottom that will say like create meme. And so that our website will know like, oh, I'm ready to like create the meme. So if we save this, we're also using more Bootstrap libraries here. We're using like button and button primary. So that's just going to make our button look a lot nicer than, it's going to make it like look blue and a lot nicer than what the original HTML would look like. So now you can see, oh, there's a button, but this button doesn't do anything. I'm clicking on it, nothing's happening. That's where the JavaScript will come in. But now our page is looking pretty good. We do want to fix like these two text things so they actually look like meme text and it's actually on the picture. So let's go ahead and like do that as well. So we need to open the CSS stuff. Okay, so since we already put IDs on there from the HTML, we can use those to format them. So the main part of meme text is like the white impact font. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's first actually put our, what's it called, our selectors. So the text on here had an ID of top text. So we're going to do a selector like this. We'll also have another selector for the bottom text. So yeah, so now we want to add like we want to change the font to be like the impact font, which is the meme font. We also want the color to be white. So let's go ahead and put those like new attributes in there. Oops. Okay, so if you refresh now, we can see, oh, our text is gone because it's white, because we're not in the place we actually want it to be, but it has changed to be a different font and different color. So we want to change the position, so we'll have to use this position attribute. So we can manually change the position. So for the top one, we want to make, we're going to use this top attribute. So they're saying like, oh, I wanted 0 pixels from the top. And then same with like left and right. There's also a bottom one, which is what we're going to use for the bottom text. So yeah, this is how we can position our text to actually be on the page. So you can also kind of guess what I'm doing, but I'm also trying to explain it as well. So now if we refresh, you can see, oh, yes, our text has now placed on the places that we actually want it to be. The last part is, though, like we kind of can't see it since with meme text, it usually has like a black outline around it. So let's try to also add a black outline on all the text. We also want to make sure it's centered inside the picture. So we can add 2 more attributes for that. So we have a text align center, and this last one is just adding the outline to the the font. So if we refresh, oh yay, now it looks way more like meme text because there's actually black outlines on it. So yay, we got that done. So this is really cool, but you know, our page still doesn't actually do what we want it to do because we want to type something here and have that appear here when we press create meme. We also, same thing with the bottom text. So let's go into the JavaScript of how we can do that. So we'll open the index.javascript page. And if you remember, I did mention the window.onload, so that's kind of what it looks like. This just makes sure it's like, okay, this stuff that's going inside this function is not going to actually run until the page is actually loaded. So just to get around any potential bugs that might happen. So, so we know we will need some kind of event listener to change when things happen. Like, for example, when the create meme button is pressed. So what kind of event are we looking for? We're looking for an event where the user actually clicks on something. So they're clicking on the create meme button specifically. We want to add a event listener to that specific element. We can do that by this function called document.getElementById. So that selects the element first, and then we can do another function called add event listener that actually puts the event listener on that thing that we selected. So the add event listener method takes in 2 parameters. The first one is the event type, and the second one is the actual function that will run after the event gets triggered. So yeah, let me write it out because I think it's hard to like visualize what I'm saying. So that will be document.getElementById. So we're going to use the same ID attributes that we used to select for CSS, but we're going to use it with JavaScript. So our button is called, it was labeled create meme. So if we go back, you can see that here. So that's how we can select it by the ID. So we select it like this, and now we want to add an event listener. And it'll take in 2 parameters. And yeah, so what kind of event do we want? We want we want a click event. There's a lot of other events that you can see, but that's the one we're going to use for in this workshop. So the second one will be a function. So I'm just going to do it like this. So I'm going to quick pause here. There's something you can do in JavaScript, which is called anonymous functions. So that you already saw 2 of them here. So you're probably used to like functions being like this. If you guys are familiar with Python, it looks something like this, like function name, and then you like do stuff here. But in JavaScript, you can actually kind of skip that part. So the anonymous function basically is a function with no explicit definition. So you can just straight up just go like this. And then you also do stuff here. So why is this useful is that you don't have to like actually define them, especially if you're only using this function once. So the good thing about having like defined functions that, oh, if you need to use this again, you can easily call it again. But so yeah, so JavaScript has this nice functionality for that. So yeah, we're gonna use that. Let me make this bigger. Okay, so yeah, so when we click, this function inside is going to run. So let's actually put stuff in here. So when the button gets clicked, we want to get the text that the user has put in the input boxes and match it to the text that is actually on the meme. So we need more selectors. We want to select this and then change the text that is in this element to be what the user puts in here. So yeah, so let's make a variable first to store that information from the input text box. So we're going to start with the top text box first. So I'm going to use a constant. So the difference with the constant and variable is that constant, you just can't change it afterwards. But it's pretty much like the same thing as a variable. So I will make this variable. I'm going to use document.getElementById again. And the input box, we actually had a ID of top text input. So we're going to use that to select it again. So that was top text input. And then we're going to get the value of it. And then now we want to do is select this element from the HTML and then change it to the value that we got from up here. So again, for document.getElementById. And if you remember, it was labeled top text for this element up here, for the H1 element up here. And then to change it, we use something called inner text. So that changes the text actually inside of the HTML itself. So right here. Yeah, so then we just set it to that variable that we just made. So yeah, so we want to do the same thing for the bottom text, so we can just copy and paste it. A lot of, programming in general, also a lot of like web development is copy and pasting, so you end up doing a lot of that. No worries, that's pretty normal. So yeah, I do a lot of copy pasting a lot. So here we go. Now we change it to the other ID that we need. So that was bottom text input. And then we want to set our variable to that new one that we just made. And then also change this. So this is bottom text. So if we save, if I didn't make any typos, this should be fine. So let's do like a cool meme. Yes, now you can see our text on the actual image changed. So that's all from our JavaScript. Okay, so now let's kind of put everything we just learned together. So let's say we want to add one more functionality to change the image based on user input. Because what if I don't want this dog? I want another meme. I'm sick of this dog. So we basically do what we did before. So let's just go through it really quick. So we need a new input box to put in the new image link that we want. So more copy pasting. Let's copy this input box that we had before for the bottom text, and let's change it to take in like a link. So we want to change. We probably should change the label. So let's change it to image source input. And then we can change this to be like image link. So yeah, everything else should be the same. So we refresh. Now we got a new input box for our image link. Now we need to go back to JavaScript and actually make it do stuff. So it's very similar code. So let's just also copy paste it as well from previously. And we're going to change all the names. So it's actually a different thing. Also change the ID since it's another element that we want to select. And then now for this part's a little different. We want to select our picture. So that is the meme pic ID. But instead of changing the inner text, we actually want to change the source. So you can do this by accessing by like dot source. So now we want to change it to that value that we have in the box. So now if we refresh this, it should work. So I had a meme already saved, so let me use that link here. You can just put some random stuff here. Now we put create meme. Oh yay, our picture got changed. It's super lit. But wait, hold on. I think there might be a bug. Because what if I put nothing in here? Like what happens? Oh no, our picture's gone. This is because whenever we click this button, like no matter what is in this image link, that will get set to the source. So maybe we can try to fix this bug right now. So let's put this in like a really quick if statement. So, or sorry, not that line, the one after. So like we want to get the value inside the box and then see if it actually has something in it. And then if it doesn't have anything in it, we don't actually want to set the source. So we just move this line here. So only if there's something actually in the image source, we want to set that or change the source of that image. So if we refresh now, let's see if that problem still happens. So we put stuff in here, but we have nothing in the image link. Okay, good. Yeah, our dog is still here. He's not gone. So that's cool. But of course, there's also more bugs that you could think of, like, oh, what if someone puts like something that's not actually a link in here? That would also probably break the site. But it's just good to think about like debugs and stuff when you're programming. That's kind of part of like development in general. But we're not going to cover how to like do that part. You can definitely do it in JavaScript, but that's a little bit out of the scope of this workshop. But just letting you know how to like think about like, sometimes people might use your app in ways that you don't expect. So make sure you try to cover as many things as you can. Yeah, so now we got all our code up. So we actually want to, deploy this now. We're going to use GitHub Pages for it. In order to do that, we need to push our code back online. So if you guys don't know what GitHub is, like, it is the Google Drive. So what I'm doing when I do this, like, I need to, is I'm going to like add everything and then I'm going to commit everything. So what that does is like, oh, I'm taking all this code that I changed locally. I'm going to put it back onto that website so that it's back on my Google Drive. So site. So yeah, if we go back to that website that we had earlier, and we refresh, you can see, yes, my code is now there. So we're gonna use GitHub Pages to deploy. So GitHub Pages is a tool that GitHub provides that allows you to host a website without you actually having to host it yourself and like setting up servers and whatnot. So a web page is really just a file that is sent to your computer from a server and it runs it. So pretty much GitHub will just do that for us. So to do that, it's real simple. Go to the settings page of the repo, and then you scroll down to the GitHub Pages tab, or GitHub Pages section, sorry. And then you want to select the branch of the code. So it's going to be on the master branch since we didn't make any branches. So let's just do that, and then we press save. So if we scroll back down to that same section, we should see a new link. Okay, yes, your site is ready to be published at this link. So if I click on that, it will take me to that. So right now it says 404. So if I actually type in like index.html, which is the actual HTML page, it will actually, oh no, it would actually take me to that page, you know, I thought. Sometimes it takes a minute. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. It actually put it back onto the main site. But sometimes it actually doesn't do that, so I have to like go to index.html to actually see it. But I guess in this case, it worked out fine. So I was going to tell you guys a hacky way to get around that. So if you guys are doing this yourself and when you publish, it doesn't actually, it has this 404, but it doesn't show up unless you actually go to the index.html page. You just want to like change something really quick and you're like just add a new line or something into the code and then just re-push again. Because sometimes GitHub doesn't like deploy to the site that you expect it unless you actually change something again. So that's just a tip if you're having trouble with deploying your website to GitHub Pages. So yeah, that is the demo. So now I can like share this link with people. Yeah, and it's online now. Is there any questions on this part? Yeah, I know I was like a little fast, so totally fine. You guys can chime in if there's any things that you don't know. Yes, for the question in chat, yes. Recommended resource, I did mention W3 Schools earlier. There's a lot of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript like resources on there. So I can like go to it really quick. Yeah, so you can see there's a ton of stuff on the side. You can even do other things like jQuery, React, like other JavaScript libraries if you want to know more about those. You can also know like stuff about like SQL, like PHP and stuff. So I think this is a really great resource. You can also just Google, like there's so much stuff on this online. So I hope that helps. Any downside to using GitHub Pages? Yes, it's a little harder to have a backend for GitHub Pages. GitHub Pages is more designed just to have front-end stuff. So like front-end stuff meaning like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But if I actually want to use like Python to do my web app, that's a little, it's kind of harder to deploy on GitHub Pages. So yeah, I would say that is the downside. So if you want to make a more complicated thing, you probably should not use GitHub Pages to deploy your web app. This is just really basic. Like, oh, if I only have some small stuff I want to deploy, or just front-end stuff, it'll be really easy to deploy here. How were the CSS, HTML, CSS, JavaScript all linked together? Just importing the files into one another? Yeah, so I did kind of go over it really quick. Sorry about that, but like, let me go back to it. So on the index.html page, to link everything together, it all comes together in the HTML side. So HTML has these two link elements, and that refers to style sheet. That means like the CSS style sheet, and that's href is kind of like, oh, this is where the style sheet is actually located. And so that's how you get the CSS to actually be in the web page. And for the JavaScript, it's kind of a similar thing, but it's with a different element. It's like a script tag. So if you can actually like put in code on the page itself, like inside this inside this element, but it's easier to do it like on the outside page. It's also a little cleaner. So yeah, so kind of just importing the file. So I can also add more files. Like if I wanted to add like another JavaScript file, like I'll just do this and like another file, and then I'll have to like add the file into my folder. So I hope that answers the question. Cool. Andrew saying your favorite meme. It's this frog. I don't know if it has a name. I don't think I can search it up though, because it's like really random. Yes, I'll try it. It's a frog. But I don't think it's gonna come up. No, this is not what I wanted. So yes, you know, this page is my favorite meme. Like I get to learn so much about different frogs. Add meme to the Google search. Oh, I forgot. that might have helped, but I don't know if it's gonna show up. Okay, it's also not Pepe, so that's why I was like, it's not a Pepe frog. So yeah, that's not the meme. But I think the next meme that I really like is the one from How to Train Your Dragon. Yeah, it's one of my top results. You know, this one's pretty good. Yeah. What are y'all's favorite memes you can share? Oh, John has a question. So how do you debug HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Is there any tools that are especially useful, or is it trial and error? Yeah, so there's actually a tool you can use. Let me go back to this. So in Chrome, other browsers have it as well, but if you're using specifically Chrome, there's something called Chrome DevTools. A lot of developers like using Chrome because of the Chrome DevTools. So how you can access it is doing, I'm on Windows, but if you have a Mac, it will probably have a different shortcut. You can also access it by clicking right-click and then inspect. So click that. And then you can see, oh, there's my HTML. There's all the CSS here. So this is really nice for debugging. You can also see like, oh, wow, look at all these things that are getting applied. You can also use the console. So just like printing, like when you're coding, like I think printing is like, you know, probably the thing that most people use to debug. You can do stuff here. So if you can just do one really quick, so console.log, and then put the stuff in. Wait, actually, let's put it in here so you can actually see it applied. So we put a console.log, and it will log the top text. So if we refresh, and then we put something here, and then we press it, oh, we can see it got printed to this console. So that's one way you can debug with JavaScript. There's also some like actual debugging tools you can use. I'm not aware exactly like what the names are, but you can definitely find those. I mostly use this when I do any web programming, like Chrome developer tools, or you know, like sometimes trial and error as well. But this part is really nice. This is for like formatting and stuff. Oh, Bryan says Firefox DevTools is better. Yes, Firefox also has DevTools, but I am a Chrome user. So yeah. Oh, Edge. I actually don't know if Edge has one. Does anyone know if Edge has it? They probably have something similar. Oh, okay, I guess they do. Yeah. Okay, Bryan says every browser has one. Okay, that would make sense. I just use too much Chrome. There's also there's actually a lot of extensions too that you can find on Chrome Extension Store to help you debug. They're more specific though to like React and Redux, but I have used those personally before. So if you do get into React and Redux, like that side of JavaScript, you can download those extensions that helps you even more with debugging. Discord. Okay, wow, everyone's just dev. I know we're getting to the end, so I did want to share. There was a raffle link, so I want to share that out since we're also approaching our time. So this is the raffle link. We also have slides. But if there's more questions, like please keep on putting them in, but that is for the raffle that we'll have later. Yeah, so I actually forgot I had one more slide on here. So thank you for coming to our workshop, and please apply on our website sbhacks.com when apps will be live. They'll be live really soon, so please stay tuned on our Facebook and other social medias. And also, if you want to get entered for the raffle, please fill out the Google Forms that I just sent. I'll also link. Let me link the social medias again. Sorry, that was like a lot of links, but hopefully you can navigate through that. And also just like a question, like if you guys are interested, like we can also do another workshop from SB Hacks on APIs and databases. That'll be like more in-depth into stuff. This is really like a high overview of like web development in general. So yeah, so open to feedback, any more like questions and stuff. There's like some really good questions here. Yes, thank you, Nicole. Slide design's very cutie. Shout out to Tina. I don't know if she's on here, but she is our designer for SB Hacks. She makes everything, all the designs. They're very beautiful. So please, she also made our website designs. Yeah, so I'm actually wearing the shirt too that she designed. Also, we have SB Hacks logo, Patagonia in the background as well. But yeah, these otters, they're very cutie. If you came to SB Hacks 6 last year, we had a lot of these otter stickers. This year, we'll have a different iteration of otters, so stay tuned. Yes, pixel art. Whee. No problem, Andrew. Yeah. I guess there are no other questions. But yeah, thank you again for coming. All the links are posted. We will post the recording as well onto social media, so if you want to refer back to it. So yeah, thank you for coming. Please enjoy the little otters. Yes, I hope your brain is more wrinkly now. You become more and more big brain, and your brain has expanded.